at a new computer case. I picked this one up. It's a Winsis WT-02. I picked this up specifically for my router. Right now it was in a crappy rack mount case that I don't really need. I don't need a rack mount case, so I'm ditching that. Took a very long time for me to find this case. I had some kind of unusual requirements in that I needed a small case, relatively. I mean, this isn't that big. It looks kind of big on this angle. I needed a small case that had one expansion slot, because the motherboard I use for my router, which is an Intel DN2800MT, it only has one Ethernet port on it. It's a great motherboard and it has lots of nice stuff, but for some stupid reason, unlike most other Intel products, they only put one Ethernet port on it, so I couldn't use it as a router on its own. So I actually have a PCIe network card, you can see it sitting right there, that I need to install in this, along with the motherboard, and I will not be using the power supply, so I'm going to just pull that out because the particular motherboard I have just runs off a standard power jack. There isn't even an ATX power supply connector on the motherboard at all. Kind of pointless having a power supply in it, might as well take it out. I don't have anything that can properly plug up the opening on it, so I'll probably just put some, I don't know, an anti-static bag or something over it just to keep the dust out. Another requirement I had was that it had space for a fan. It doesn't need to be a big fan. In fact, the fan mounting on this says it's 60mm, but it's not in the greatest spot, so I may need to go smaller. So I went into my parts drawer, and I've got a 40mm, 60mm, 80mm, and a 120mm. So we'll see which one fits the best, because I might use a side panel. This case is designed to work on either side, either on its side or standing up, but the problem is when it's standing up, it does come with some legs in here, the little accessory pouch. So it comes on with these little legs, but I have a carpeted floor and I'm probably going to put this back onto the floor, so that's not enough to raise it up enough to get the airflow where I want it. It'll probably just plug up. So because for some stupid reason they decided to put the fan mount here. There's another space for a fan mount here, but this lines up with the motherboard, so there's a good chance that I won't actually be able to put a fan right here. See, there's it doesn't have specific mounts for it, you just kind of line it up. In theory, this can take different sized fans, so we'll see. I could fit the 40mm in here, no problem, I think, with the motherboard in place. But if I can use the 60, I might as well. Bigger fans are almost always quieter because they can spin at a lower RPM. So I obviously want to go to the biggest fan model I can get. Here's the back. It has a TFX style power supply. Common in smaller cases. It is not in any way, shape, or form compatible with an ATX power supply other than the connectors. The connectors are all the same, but the actual form factor is totally different. As you can see, there's space for an expansion card and your standard motherboard cutout. Unfortunately, I only have the micro one. The big one I had to use in my rack mount case, and I had to trim it a bit because it was the case itself was kind of non-standard, so I ended up having to throw that away. I'll probably just put this in for now and maybe order the full-size one again someday just to, you know, keep everything perfect. But, so, power supply going out, don't need it. The expansion card will be, or slot will be used, as you see, pretty thin metal. It's folded, which is nice, so it's not sharp. Something that's missing in a lot of cheaper cases. This case itself I paid $56 for on eBay. Newegg and stuff have it for similar prices. There's a 02T model, I think it's a T, and it has a card reader on the front. And as far as I know, that's the only difference. And I do not need a card reader because this is for what is essentially just a router. Inside, we've got the big fan for the power supply. And one thing that I really like about this case, this was actually one of the other weird requirements I had, is I wanted a full-sized optical bay. This computer case has a full-sized bay. You can put in a DVD drive or something, not that you'd ever want to on a router. The reason I want it is because Crystal Fonts makes a drive bay sized LCD that I'd like to put in here. I have one already, but it's currently in use in my NAS, so I'd like to get a nice one for here someday when it shows up on eBay, and yeah, it'll look nice. But until then, it's just going to be the filler. Oh, I didn't really go over the front stuff. Just USB 2, audio in and out, won't use that. Power, I'm told it has a blue LED. So anyway, getting back to the internals, this cage pushes down, at least it did last time, and hang on, let me fight with this, there we go. Okay, so this is the optical bay. It is a toolless bay. You can just flip this and it latches itself in. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of toolless bays. I've never tried this one. But in general, I don't like them because they very rarely hold it as well. I would much rather put in some screws, because let's face it, how long does it take to put in 4 screws? And people complain, so they need a toolless one. Please. Below it, there's another removable cage. This is for a 3.5-inch drive. As far as I know, it does not have mounting for a 2.5-inch SSD. Let me just see if I can, maybe I can pop this out. There we go. Nope, no SSD mounting in it, so you'd need an adapter if you're installing an SSD. The motherboard I'm using actually has an M-SATA connector on it, so I don't need it. It's literally just right on the board, so no need for a separate SSD. Internally, we've got the front connections for audio and USB, power and reset. The power supply that ships with it has a standard ATX power, 1 Molex connector, 1 floppy connector, CPU power connector, also called a P4 connector, also called 12-volt power for your CPU, blah blah blah, whatever you want to call it. That one's 4-pin instead of the 8-pin, and 2 serial ATA power connectors. And you'll notice it actually has the orange 3.3 volt line, which, as far as I know, nothing uses. I've never run into a drive that actually wants the 3.3 volt line. They all use the 12 volt and the 5 volt lines, but you know, I guess it's part of the official standard, so sometimes they actually do put it on it, even though, as far as I know, the only thing I have that actually has a 3.3 volt SATA power connector is this Intel motherboard I'm putting in. The power cable that can run from the motherboard to your drive has the 3.3 volt line, but I don't use it. Like I said, I have a M-SATA SSD on it. So, if anyone knows of a drive that actually uses the 3.3 volt line, let me know, because I've never found one. And I'm curious to see if there's anything that explicitly will not run without it. This is the motherboard I'm going to be putting in it. Like I said, it's a DN2800MT. It uses an Atom N2800. The N2800 is a 1.86 gigahertz dual core. It has hyper-threading, so it shows up as 4 cores. It's one of the 32 nanometer 6.5 watt models. The actual whole system, including a fan, pulls around 13 watts. This particular motherboard I like a lot because it has a proper PCI Express slot, 2 memory slots, only up to 4 gigs. Only newer Atoms, I think, support more than 4 gigs of RAM, is the M serial ATA slot that I have filled with a Crucial, I think it's an M4 32 gig. It was whatever was cheap. It's just for a router, I don't care. It has HDMI out, VGA. I think this is the yellow ones are always on USB, and then you got your standard USB. Only one Ethernet port. Sound, which I will never use. Serial ATA, power, all those good things. This can run completely passively, although I do notice it gets quite hot. Not so much the processor, but I believe this is just the platform controller hub. As you can see, I stuck one of these little heat sinks on it. This is from like an Ethernet controller, I believe. And it even matches. So I just stuck that on. And as you can see, I've got my genuine Intel Ethernet card here for the second port. PCI Express. And one other cool thing about this motherboard is it has a lot of legacy ports. 2 serial, it also has a parallel port, which is good if you're connecting to LCDs and that kind of stuff. So it makes sense on a router. Obviously, I could save a little bit of power by turning off things like the video and whatnot, but I like to be able to plug it into a monitor and stuff if I need to do things on it. Yeah, it's a little overkill for a router with the sound card and whatnot, but I still really like this motherboard. And when I bought it, it was, I think, $90, which isn't too bad at all, especially for what you're getting. I put in the motherboard and wired in some of the stuff. I haven't plugged in that, but I put in the card and whatnot. I also mounted one of the fans on the side panel. This is actually the 80mm. It lines up right over the motherboard, and with it, this is set up in an exhausting configuration. With it exhausting, it should pull over enough air over the chip to keep everything cool, and the larger fan means it'll be a little bit quieter. A couple things I noticed. Well, one, doesn't look too fancy with the power supply missing and the wrong faceplate, but hey, it'll work. But the main thing is this card just doesn't seem to sit right where it should in the case. It looks like it may have a problem plugging in, but I'll give it a shot and see if I can fiddle with it to see if it'll line up properly. Another thing to consider would be, I mean, if you wanted real optimal cooling, would be to seal up this vent, because what's going to happen is the fan's going to exhaust here and it's probably going to pull in most of the air here. You would force it to pull air in from the bottom, going over everything if you plugged it up, and obviously if you had the power supply and stuff plugged up like it should be. In this particular case, because the two things that get hot are over here, it's not really a problem if it's just sucking in here. I think it'll be more than enough. Like I said before, this thing is designed to run in a fanless configuration, so it should work fine in this setup. I'm just going to finish plugging in everything and maybe open up the power supply, take a look. I've heard really bad things about this power supply. Like, most of the negative reviews on this case are because the power supply died within like a week. So I'll take a look at it, see if it looks absolutely terrible or not.